Hi, I'm Rob from CVG, and today we'll be taking a closer look at the Xbox One pad. So let's start with the most important point. The Xbox 360 controller, many believe to be the best out there at the moment, apart from it has one Achilles heel. It's the D-pad. The D-pad is a bit rickety, it's a bit loose, it's raised too high. Whereas with the Xbox One controller, they've gone for a more defined cross-shaped D-pad, a bit like Nintendo's famous D-pads. How does it feel? It genuinely feels fantastic. The D-pad itself has been, as you can see here, has been lowered, so it's very flush against the controller. It's far more defined, and it has an amazing click feel as well. And also, you can slide your thumb around, and as you slide your thumb around it, you know it's very defined where you are. There's no ambiguity to what part of the D-pad that you're pressing, and it's very comfortable as well. So let's move on to how the controller feels. In terms of weight, the Xbox One controller is slightly heavier, noticeably I suppose, but not so much that you would complain. Also, quite interestingly, I didn't realise this at first, but when you actually feel the Xbox 360 controller, there is a slight hollowness to it. You can definitely tell there's space inside the pads. With the Xbox One controller, you don't actually feel that. It feels very solid. The weight feels well balanced. There's nothing odd or peculiar about it. But also, there have been other changes, of course, in terms of furniture. If you take a look at the back, you probably know this already, the battery pack has disappeared. Actually, to change the batteries on your Xbox One pad, you just flip up the hood and stick some batteries in there like that. So the removal of the battery pack has given some extra space on the back, which makes things less crowded, it's far more comfortable, which is a nice addition. There is one small point that I thought, at first, I thought wasn't actually that important. So on the back of the Xbox 360 pad, there are screw holes, and they're not really that noticeable, but if you play for many hours, you can slightly notice their presence, I suppose. It's not really that annoying, to be honest. However, because the Xbox One controller has none of that, you actually do realise what a difference it makes. So let's turn to the shoulder buttons and the triggers. The triggers on the Xbox One controller have been dampened at the base. So when you press it down, there is no click to it anymore. You probably can't even hear it. When you compare it to the Xbox 360 controller, when you press down on the triggers, you get that, a real hollow clickety-click to it. So there's a greater sense of quality to it. As well as that, the shoulder buttons have been widened a little bit. There's not much difference. There's a slight bit more resistance to it. Not too much. You might notice if you play your 360 all the time. So there has been slight tweaks and definitely improvements to the triggers. Turning quickly to the analog sticks. If we get a close up here, you'll notice that the analog sticks on the Xbox One controller are a little bit taller, and because of that, there's a little bit more pivot to them. They feel a little looser, in fact. That's probably a good thing, I think. It's a minor tweak. It's not like their travel is huge now and they slide all about the place. But you can definitely feel slightly less resistance to them, and I think it gives you slightly more control. Also, you'll notice around the I guess the rim here, there is a there is soft plastic. If you compare it to the Xbox 360 pad, there were sort of 4 very tiny sort of plastic protrusions that try to, I guess, give you a bit of resistance. I think the more you played it, the more there was a chance that the analog stick could slide out of your finger momentarily almost. I don't think that's going to happen with the Xbox One controller. There is definite grip around the sides, around the side of the analog sticks. When it comes to pressing in, there's absolutely no difference. So let's move on to the face buttons. If you look at the diamond on the right here of both pads, there's not much difference really. They're in the same position. However, when it comes to their depth, there's actually less protrusion on the Xbox One buttons, and that actually works really well. They're slightly softer, and I think that they're less rickety as well. If you have a look at the 360 buttons, they're slightly rickety. Some would say they're slightly over pronounced, the way they push out, maybe just a bit too much. On the Xbox One controller, they're flatter, more flush. I think they're slightly more comfortable. So, final bits and pieces. On the base here, there is a port for your headset. On the roof here, there's a micro USB port. When you stick a USB wire into the controller, it goes into wired mode. The radio shuts down, and apparently it's a true wired mode connection. I imagine that's how you're going to connect this to your PC as well. PC support isn't available until 2014, Microsoft tells us. So very quickly, let's have a look at the back and the start button. They're still there. They're no longer called the back and the start button. It's because they are for different tasks, such as switching between applications and so forth. One final thing, when you turn on the Xbox 360 pad, it does this, lights up around the symbol, and usually syncs. We don't have a 360 here, so it's not syncing. Let's see what happens when you press this button here. And I don't know if you can make that out, but it lights up a bit more subtly. It doesn't stick out as much, I suppose, and when you're running on low battery, when this thing starts blinking at you like this, it can be quite distracting, whereas this, the light is far softer. So overall, we haven't been able to test out the rumble just yet. I'm told it's spectacular. There's impulse triggers, and that affects the entire pad. It's far more nuanced. But that being said, even though we haven't tested out the impulse triggers in depth, I would say that if you think the Xbox 360 pad is the best out there, then you're looking at something which is now the best out there. The Xbox One controller is better than the Xbox 360 pad pretty much in every single way. If it's the D-pad, then it's significantly better. If it's the triggers, it's much better. There are tweaks here and there, it's far more comfortable. Whether you prefer it over the DualShock 4, I guess we'll need to do more tests to find out. But for now, I think if you do get an Xbox One, I think you're going to be very happy with the controller.